and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. We have a little ladies' tea tonight as usual, and we are joined by the Daily Caller's Mary Rooke. We love having you, Mary, as well as host of the Mom Wars podcast and Substack, Bethany Mandel. Ladies, welcome. It is quite a time. There's a lot that's been going on. Over the weekend, we saw the obvious bombing of these nuclear sites in Iran. This was a strategic, precise, and I would say almost flawless. I don't know anything that went wrong with the attack by the United States on these Iranian nuclear sites. The president asked Iran to come to the table. He said, I'll give you 60 days, not 61, not 63, 60 days. They did not do it. And we saw what happened on Saturday night. He went in, and as a man of his word, Mary, he said, you know what? I'm not playing around. He didn't attack anywhere other than these nuclear sites. We were very strategic in that and very precise in that. We know we're weeks away from having a nuclear warhead. They were enriching uranium. They were not supposed to do that, and the president was very clear prior to that. He said that there can be no peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon. He said that they are not to be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and so he made this decision. I thought it was incredible to hear from Pete Hegseth and from the Joint Chiefs chairman on Sunday morning. They were describing this whole situation, the fact that you had these planes flying for 30-some hours from Missouri all the way over to Iran to complete this mission. They were completely undetected. Mary, give me your overview on all of this and the message that you think it has sent to the rest of the world, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't know that anybody questioned President Trump when he drew a red line and he said, do not cross this red line. I don't think anyone is ever going to question him ever again, Mary.
No, and we talked about this last time about how previous presidents have drawn red lines and then kind of taken their foot and smushed them away so that it becomes a little bit more blurry on whether or not they're going to take action. Trump's been pretty clear from the very beginning. He didn't want Iran to have nuclear warheads nor the capability of creating them. And so I think this is pretty consistent with what he's been saying all along. There's two Americans inside me. There's one that's like the Toby Keith American that's like, we're going to put a boot in your A and, we're going to go over there and do that. And so when you're listening to the Joint Chiefs talk about the mission, you feel really proud of our military and how strong and powerful they are. And there's nowhere else in the world that could have done something like that. And so you really feel a lot of pride as an American for seeing something, take place and be so successful. There's also another American that lives inside me that, grew up during the global war on terror and watched boots on the ground, watched how it changed my own community, how it changed the boys coming back home. And so I think that Americans are right to have a fear of having a boots on the ground war right now. And I think obviously this escalates everything that's happening over there. But at the same time, you have to sit back and remember that he's not President Obama, he's not President Biden, he's not President Bush, and he is definitely not President Harris. And so when you look at that, you feel more safe and capable in his hands, and you're just hoping that the people around him are giving him great information and helping him, make these decisions. I do think that it was really powerful when he came out and spoke to the American people afterwards, because not that you could see trepidation on his face, but you could see the weight of his decision sitting on his face and on his shoulders. You could also see that with Vice President J.D. Vance behind him and the rest of the men flanking him. And so this isn't something that they went in lightly to do, but this was something they felt needed to get done. And I think as Americans, as we sit back, we just pray for our leaders and hope that they're doing everything to keep us out of another boots on the ground war.
And no one wants war. President Trump has been very clear, Bethany. He doesn't want war. He wants peace. In fact, in his address at 10 p.m. on Saturday night, he said that. He said that we want peace. He said it in Truth Social posts. He said it on X. He wants peace. He wants the whole point of this mission was not to, antagonize Iran. The mission was to take out their nuclear capabilities. That was successfully done. He tried a week ago, according to reports, to meet in Turkey. President Trump was even willing to go to Turkey to meet with the Ayatollah, to have these talks, to actually diplomatically come to the table and discuss this. And he was, in a lot of ways, basically just snubbed by the Ayatollah. They the Iranian leadership there said, we're not going to engage in this. And so the option was sit back and continue to appease this regime, who we know has committed atrocious human rights violations, whose own citizens, by the way, in Iran, most of them do not want these people in power anymore. It'll be very interesting to see everything that goes on in that country going forward. But President Trump was very clear that they were going to have no other option. So it was either appease them and allow them to develop a nuclear weapon, and imagine lunatics and people who've committed the most egregious atrocities in the world with a nuclear weapon, Bethany. So I think he really did feel like he had no other option. I think Mary's exactly right. You could see on his face when he came out to address the nation the weight of this. You could see in those pictures, there were incredible pictures from the Situation Room showing President Trump and members of his cabinet and members of his top intelligence teams there kind of, play by play going through all of this. He was almost left with no other option. And it's very interesting for me because Sunday morning, I got so many texts from people who I'm not even sure exactly where they stand politically. I think they're probably right in the middle somewhere. Some of these people aren't even American citizens. People were so happy to see that there was action taken to stop crazy people from developing a nuclear weapon. So look, as far as I'm concerned, I don't really know that he had any other option, but he's been very clear he wants peace.
Yeah, and this was how we achieve peace in this region. The Iranian government has been very clear, death to America, death to Israel, and we should take them at their word and believe them. And the best way that we can get on a footing where we are able to be successful in protecting our national interest is making sure that they don't have the most powerful weapon in humanity. And so this was, something that every single prior president said, just like moving their embassy to Jerusalem, by the way. They all said, I'll move the embassy to Jerusalem, and none of them did. And every president said, this is a red line. We cannot allow Iran to get to the point to develop nuclear weapons. And then they didn't do anything. They kicked the can down the road. And President Obama gave them suitcases full of
pallets of cash.
That was how they tried to fix it. So, when President Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, everyone warned it was going to be World War III, and it didn't become World War III because people respected him and they feared him. And that's what you want in a president. You don't want a president who gives handfuls of cash in suitcases to terrorists. You want a president who stands there and says, I will annihilate you, and the other side says, yeah, I believe that. Maybe let's hold off. And I think that, the Iranians got that message over the course of the weekend, and everyone else around the world, from the North Koreans, everywhere else, got the same message that this is not a man to be trifled with.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was thinking, Mary, wonder what Vladimir Putin is thinking. We know that Iran is reaching out to Russia to see if they'll kind of back them somehow. Wonder what President Xi of China is thinking. Wonder what Kim Jong-un of North Korea is thinking. You have to look at the guts it took to pull off this mission, to press go on this one, and then to look at the lethality and the precision of our military. I mean, my hat goes off to these pilots. This was incredible. And it is so cool. You see those B-2 planes, you see it. And my husband, of course, after all this comes out on Saturday night, he says it every time. He's like, I should have been in the military. I should have flown airplanes. It's really like American patriotism. I feel like I'm watching Top Gun or something. And by the way, the memes, like the internet is undefeated. All the things I've seen since have been amazing in so many different ways. But I wonder what I would be thinking if I were one of our adversaries and I saw what just went down over the weekend.
Shortly after President Trump had that conversation with Vladimir Putin a couple weeks ago, he called the Ayatollah apparently and was like, listen, he means business. You need to come to the table because this is going to get bad for you. And they chose not to do it. And that this is kind of the response on the other side of not coming to the table. You also saw reports coming out on Sunday claiming that Russia has promised to back Iran with some sort of military assistance. And so you wonder what that is, considering the fact they're in their own war with Ukraine right now. And it's not really just Ukraine, as we all know. It's in a war with almost all of NATO. And so, you see that. I think that this should really scare China, considering the fact that China gets about 50% of its oil from Iran and through that strait. And so when you're a massive country like China and you need that energy in order to be able to keep moving, and if you're wanting to make a play on Taiwan, you're looking at something like this and going, okay, well, what is my viability to actually be able to successfully take Taiwan now? As I've seen, the Americans are very capable of being able to come in and do precision strikes. And so I think this is a wake-up call for our adversaries. Like, we may have been sleepy over the last 4 years with Joe Biden in office, but it's no longer like that. We have someone in charge who's not afraid to speak big and also have a big stick. And so I think that that's a great thing to do. Again, I'd say that there's a difference in precision striking and then, spilling American blood over there. And so I think that there's a hesitation there to be like, let's go to war with Iran and take them out. However, I will say this. Iran hates us. They're a terrible regime. They have been. They're terrible for their people. They're terrible for the region. And so if there's something that we can do, like what Trump did on Sunday or Saturday night, then I think that that's an acceptable play if you have to make one.
Yeah. What was interesting to me, Bethany, too, is to see the Democrat reaction. I switched around on Saturday night. A side note, I do have to say to my father-in-law, this was a great mission, but you did disrupt my 9 p.m. Fox show because it was interrupted. I know.
How dare you do that to you, Laura?
Come on. We couldn't have waited an hour. No, I'm just joking. What a cool thing. I couldn't, of course, tear myself away, but I was switching to all the different channels because I want to get a broad scope of what everybody's saying. And it was really interesting to me to hear the guests that they had on MSNBC, CNN. A lot of them were having to give credit to the president for doing this. Bethany, I think, as you mentioned, there have been so many presidents before President Trump who said, we're going to do this. We're going to prevent Iran from making a nuclear weapon. Barack Obama sent them pellets of cash. You had Joe Biden, who got them back into the Iran nuclear deal, which, of course, President Trump removed us from during his first term in office. And because they were back in this deal, they got money. They were allowed to sell. They sold so much oil over the course of the 4 years. Because also, don't forget, we weren't sending a lot of oil. We weren't sending a lot out of the United States because of Joe Biden's dumb decisions. Iran enriched itself. They were able to then fund their proxies around the Middle East that have caused terror everywhere. Look at October 7th in Israel. They are funding this terrorism around the Middle East, and then they also are able to enrich uranium. And the whole thing is crazy. So you had so many presidents before him say they would do it. It took President Trump to actually do it. And the only thing I saw the Democrats really getting behind, and this is, I guess, their big play, is that they are trying to say that it was unconstitutional for President Trump to make this decision, that only Congress can declare war. Well, President Trump was very clear. Let me read his post. We've completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran. All planes are now outside of Iranian airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There's not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace, in all caps. He's calling for peace. He doesn't want war. He's been very specific. I also saw J.D. Vance on Meet the Press on Sunday morning. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, Kristen Welker pushed him really hard to try to say something about war, something about getting our, boots on the ground, Mary, as you keep saying. And he kept repeating, this was about taking out Iran's nuclear program. You even had Senator John Fetterman, who, of course, is the most reasonable of the Democrats these days, say, as I've long maintained, this was the correct move by POTUS. Iran is the world's leading sponsor of terrorism and cannot have nuclear capabilities. I'm grateful for and salute the finest military in the world. Bethany, I guess that's where the Democrats are just going to go. They're going to say, oh, this is unconstitutional. It'll give them some leg to stand on. Is that's their play, I guess?
I disagree. I think that there's some good ones like Fetterman, like Richard Torres from New York. They are rational who see the world as it is, but the TDS is so strong from so many of them. I'm seeing, the chattering class of influencers and all of these content creators on the left who reflexively say whatever President Trump did was bad, therefore this was bad. And it's wild because these are people who paint themselves to be progressive, and they are basically running defense for the Iranian regime who throw gays off of rooftops. Like,
it's crazy.
It's wild to watch that. There's this social media account called Humans of New York that has 12 million followers on Instagram. And yesterday, right after this happened, he posted, here's some pictures of Iranian children, as if that's supposed to be like pulling my heartstrings that we shouldn't be destroying nuke sites. But I'm seeing like the AOCs of the world right before this happened, and it's going to get lost in the news cycle. AOC walked out the Columbia grad student who spent 100 days in prison because he was fomenting terrorism on Columbia's campus. She walked out with him. Like, this is my friend Noah Pollock called them the Hamas Democrats. That to me is the future of the Democratic Party, much more than John Fetterman. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that we had a rational other side, but I don't see it. Chuck Schumer's been silent on this.
Have you ever thought about what your investments are funding? Most Americans have no idea that their portfolios may be quietly supporting radical left-wing agendas that often run directly counter to their core beliefs and values. But it doesn't have to be that way. With Monorail's investment analyzer, you can uncover where your money is really going, bringing greater transparency to your financial decisions. This powerful tool helps reveal which companies your portfolio is supporting and allows you to explore options that better align with your values. Monorail also provides information about the Patriot portfolio, which includes ETFs that invest in companies that reflect pro-America principles. Whether you already invest or are just getting started, Monorail makes it easy to see how your financial future can reflect what matters most to you. No need to compromise on what you believe to build towards the future. Get up to $1,000 when you make your first deposit. Download the Monorail app today in the App Store or Google Play. Your money should reflect your mission. And now you have a way to find out. As you know, our friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of your life. He didn't just stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the best bed sheets ever. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike is offering the best deal on his Giza Dream bed sheets. Any size, any color, just $49.98. That's right, you can even get queens, kings, split kings, and California kings, any size, any color, just $49.98. Order now because when they're gone, they're gone. Also, for a limited time, when your order is over $100, you will receive $100 in free digital gifts. Call 1-800-624-3945, use promo code Lara, or go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code LARA for the amazing offer of $49.98 on the Giza Dream Sheets, any size and any color. Number again is 1-800-624-3945. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. You're right. There are a handful of reasonable Democrats. And Bethany, the fact that we point to John Fetterman, who even a year ago, I think a lot of us thought was a little bit like a little radical in a lot of his views. He's really come around, and he's been very reasonable in his stance on a lot of things. And by the way, very complimentary of President Trump on his on the parade for the Army and the celebration of the 250th birthday of the Army. He's been very strong in his support for Israel and was very happy to praise President Trump here. One of the things that I do think scares a lot of people, Mary, is the idea that some form of retaliation could come by way of terror cells that are already here in the United States. And you have to take a step back and take a look at why we would be scared that that would be happening. Why did we have an open border for 4 years where you had 20 million people come in here unvetted? And we, time after time, we were talking about people on the terror watch list, people on the terror watch list coming in. You know, we have the gotaways. We don't even know what those people were doing here. Why didn't they want to get processed in the country? Why didn't they want us to know who they were? That is why we took the border so seriously. And I think it's amazing in this moment right now where, you know, that's the other thing that I heard on a lot of the Sunday shows, a lot of the, left-leaning, which most of them are, shows, they all are worried about some retaliation and by way of having something happen here in America that you had people on the ground here ready to attack Americans. Well, this, Mary, is the problem when you just have an open border. This is one of the reasons President Trump has been incredibly strong on keeping the border closed, making sure we vet people properly. He's even gone so far as to tell countries who he doesn't feel like do proper vetting in order to, fulfill our visa applications. We are probably not going to take people from your countries anymore if you guys can't assure us of who these people are and that they're safe to come to America. This is what we wanted to prevent, Mary. And I get that people are worried about this. I understand. I'm an American too. I'm a mom. I never want to see this happen on American soil, but this is why we wanted a closed border, Mary.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I think they're actually correct in the fact that they should be worried about something like that happen. But then they have to take back and they have to look at why, like you said, because President Biden allowed all of those millions of people in unvetted. We have no idea who's living inside our country right now, but they're more than happy to stand in front of ICE cars and stop these deportations that are happening. President Trump is going after criminals inside our country. He's trying to target these people that Joe Biden allowed to be able to terrorize our communities, and yet they want to stop that and then at the same time try and claim that what Trump did in Iran is going to inflame one of these terrorist cells. Do they know something that we don't know? Do they know where the terrorist cells are? Do they know for a fact that Biden let them in and that's the reason why they're so scared, but they're not willing to report that to the American people whenever there's violence going on in LA and people are trying to stop these mass deportations from happening? I tell them to wake up. I mean, if the reality is that they're scared of safety, then they should be aiding Trump's mission to deport as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, rather than sitting back and, fanning, oh, my humanity, my humanity. You know what? The humane thing to do is keep your countrymen safe. And if that's what you're trying to, sell on your cable news show, then you need to sit back and you need to go, okay, well, listen, now that this has happened and we have a heightened sense of security, then maybe Trump is right. Maybe we should be getting these criminals out of our country.
Yeah, I'm so curious, Bethany. The reaction to the deportations of so many people. By the way, there are nearly 1 million fewer illegal immigrants right now in America than the day Donald Trump took the oath of office in January. Isn't that amazing? It's amazing what can happen if you actually have the impetus to do it. Some of these people self-deported because President Trump said, hey, I'll get you a free plane ticket and I'll also give you $1,000 stipend cash to leave the country, and then you can reapply. You see all these commercials from Secretary Kristi Noem telling people that if you leave now, you can reapply and you can come back legally. That's how we're supposed to do this thing. So we have 1 million fewer illegals here than we did the day President Trump took office back in January. But there are so many more people who I think are starting to get it. There was recent polling done, Bethany, where you have nearly 6 in 10 registered voters who were surveyed, including a majority of Hispanic voters and nearly half of voters under the age of 25. That's supposed to be a base for the Democrat Party, who say they support this administration's policy on increasing the pace of deportations, prioritizing individuals with criminal records. That's who we want out of the country. If you are a gangbanger, if you are a drug dealer, if you are a murderer, if you are a rapist, we want you out of America. If you're on the terror watch list, my God, we want you out of America. I'm really curious, Bethany, what happens with all of these protests, which I believe are completely staged. I believe they are funded by the same people who funded the George Floyd riots. But I'm curious to see what happens because most people in America do not want to see criminals who illegally came here in our country. Do you think any of the things that happened over the weekend are going to have an impact on this?
So I think it's interesting because I agree. I think that the biggest terror threat was obviously through the southern border. We saw people coming over the southern border that had terror ties. But I think that the biggest boosters of President Trump are the left. When they deploy their talking points, I just sit back and I'm like, I mean, yeah, that's true. He is just a Maryland dad. When we had that arrest of the Maryland dad, and the congressman went down and sat with him and held
had
his
a margarita.
Please go ahead. Please keep on describing him as the Maryland dad. And the other talking point that I find really strange from the left when it comes to illegal immigration is the videos of them picking in the fields. Like, well, do you want to lose your indentured servants? I'm like, I feel like that's not very progressive to say that out loud, that you want to keep the indentured servants working in the fields for $3 an hour. Maybe that's not the talking point to deploy. And maybe I should shut up because I'm giving them too many ideas.
Yeah, don't give them too many tips, but
no, but I watch them in fascination because every single talking point that they've deployed against President Trump seems to help his polling numbers because they paint themselves as the party of people who will call terrorists Maryland dads and keep them in the United States at all costs, give them every possible right that actually belong to our citizens, not to mention Medicaid, all of our public services. It's wild. And then, for the folks who are not illegal, who are not like gangbangers and criminals, we want to keep them as indentured servants in the fields of America. That, it's crazy.
Good luck to them. Yeah, I agree with you. Every time they're like, who's going to clean your floors and stuff and toilets? I'm like, are you guys serious? You really, that's the line you're going with? I'm always, by the way, Bethany, shocked by it too, because it's what they really believe. But that's the problem. They say the quiet part out loud, and they're just happy to. Yes, they're happy to put it out there.
They canceled Ozzy Osbourne's daughter for saying that on The View, where she was like, "Is he just going to deport every person that cleans our homes?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that." And then she got canceled, but now we're talking about elected officials coming out and saying that same exact thing.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe we need just to step out of their way and let them completely run themselves into the ground. Speaking of The View, before we go today, we can't get enough of how much dumber people get from watching The View. It's much different than The Right View, by the way. You hopefully learned something on this show. Whoopi Goldberg, who, I don't know, she says a lot of crazy things. She basically said, you had Alyssa Farah say that the U.S. in 2025 is not as bad as Iran in 2025. And Whoopi Goldberg chimed in immediately and said, no, not if you're black. Okay, so her whole thing is like, apparently if you are a black person in America, you have it worse than people living in Iran. This whole thing really blew up on her. There were so many people who went absolutely nuts. Here's some of the comments. You're a multi-millionaire black woman on national television saying this. That alone proves the difference between America and Iran. You have the freedom to say that. In Iran, women can't even show their hair. The fact that she went so far in saying this, Mary, I found really amazing, because you really take a step back and you look at the way people dump on America. And look, the women of The View are notorious for it. A lot of Democrats are notorious for it. There is nowhere else in the world where you have the freedoms that we do. Whoopi Goldberg is worth somewhere around $60 million, apparently. Only in America would you be able to say that. Would a woman be able to say that? Women don't even have ownership of anything in places like Iran. It's sort of wild, but I'm wondering if they're going to retaliate on Whoopi the same way that you just mentioned that they retaliated on Ozzy Osbourne's daughter.
Yeah, probably not. And I would, point her to the fact that the rising star within the Democratic Party right now is a black woman named Jasmine Crockett from Texas, of all places. And so is she trying to tell me that somehow Jasmine Crockett is like, an anomaly, that this isn't like the reality of what, America has to offer, where you can be as dumb as she is and still rise to being a representative of the United States? No, I find it to be insulting. I find it to be insulting of the place that my family has been, spilled our blood and toiled the soil for generations. We can trace our family back since before the American Revolution.
Wow.
We helped found Texas. So I think whenever you're looking back on words like that from Whoopi Goldberg, it should enrage every American, because it's not true. You look at Iran, like you said, and women have no rights. A lot of men don't have rights. You have to conform to their specific idea on how to live, and that's not how it is here in America. You can be of any religion, you can be of any faith, you can have no faith at all and still survive and thrive here. And so I find it just so insulting, and it makes me want to shake her and be like, you don't deserve to be on television. Let me enact my my sense of power and tell you to get off television. If I could do that, I would.
Well, I'll tell you who was very critical of her, and generally speaking, The View in its entirety, was Bill Maher. He said, we got to do something about The View, Bethany. I agree with Bill Maher. I find myself agreeing with him more and more. We've got to do something about The View. How are they still on the air? How are people really tuning in and watching this like absolute just trash during the day where they just dump on our country, dump on our president, try to shame people who feel any differently than they do? Are people watching this, do you think?
It's wild because there are, I mean, I think the honest answer is like, let's ask that question of their advertisers. Do you believe that women who show their hair in Iran are, more underprivileged than a $600 million, $60 million woman who's on television who talks about how the president is a fascist every single day on national television every single day, and she's allowed back on television every single day? It doesn't sound like a fascist to me, but maybe I need to look it up. But I think this question is really, if we want to be serious, like, let's have a conversation with their advertisers. Let's all sit down at 11 a.m. tomorrow and watch to see who's buying those ads, because this is not feminism. At the end of the day, I mean, I remember watching when it was Barbara Walters, and it was a good show back then.
Yes.
Meredith Vieira, Barbara Walters. Meghan McCain was amazing on that show, too. That was the only time anyone ever talked about The View, was when Meghan McCain was on there. But now, it's just this, like, hate fest. It's really filled with anger, and I don't understand the allure. They probably don't have the viewership. But I wonder what the ABC executives are thinking, because the only time anyone ever talks about The View now is when they do things that are cancel worthy, like what Whoopi Goldberg just did. And she needs to come out and to apologize, not to the American people, but to the Iranian women who she degraded and debased the situation that they've been living in since the 70s.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I'm so curious what ABC ultimately does with The View. I mean, everything has its moment. Nothing is forever. And I feel like we could find something much more worthy of people's time to put on in that block during the day for 5 days a week. Well, ladies, thank you so much to both of you, to Mary and Bethany, joining me today. A lot of things going on. I think that there will be no lack of it. This is a president who is moving at warp speed with pretty much everything that he does. So we appreciate both of you being here to break it all down for us. And to everybody at home, as always, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View. And I won't back down.